Hello and welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast. I'm Terry, the creator and co-host of this podcast. I've lived with depression most of my life, and I know how easy it can be to feel all alone in the experience. I'm not alone, and you aren't either.
And I'm Dr. Anita Sands, a licensed clinical psychologist with a number of my own diagnoses, all of which bring a certain amount of anxiety and depression along with them. There is great power in shared experiences. We share our own as we engage in intimate and candid conversations with our weekly guests, exploring different perspectives on and experiences with depression.
We keep it real because depression is real. We keep it hopeful because there truly is hope, in spite of what depression tells you. We would like to acknowledge our new partnership with Recovery.com. Recovery.com provides resources and information for individuals seeking treatment for mental health or addiction issues. It offers a fact-checked and vetted online platform of treatment centers to help individuals find the right path to recovery. This episode is sponsored by the A.B. Korkor Foundation for Mental Health. Hello, Anita.
Hi, Terry. You know, if there's someone or something that epitomizes what people think a person with depression is like, it's probably Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. He's one of my favorites.
He's one of my favorites.
He's an old stuffed donkey whose catchphrase, "Thanks for noticing me," illustrates how little he expects from life. On the map in the Winnie the Pooh book, his stick home is in what's called Eeyore's gloomy place, rather boggy and sad. He moves and talks slowly, is not much interested in the adventures of the other characters, though often tags along at their urging. Eeyore expects misfortune, and he does little to prevent it.
And there are times when those of us who live with depression might describe ourselves that way. But only sometimes. There are also times, lots of times, that you would absolutely never know that we, or the person you work with, see at the grocery store, at service, or at your dinner table, struggle with depression.
We say all this as introduction to today's guest, Paula. She is the opposite of the stereotype of someone living with depression. I met her at that podcast conference, and she definitely had what I would call Tigger energy in person. The very opposite of Eeyore. She seems very energetic, outgoing, and confident, and the kind of person who might be described as a dynamo or a natural-born leader. But that is just one part of her persona and story. Paula's depression is also just one part. The whole of Paula, like all of us, is more nuanced and complicated. At that podcasting conference, when she mentioned from the stage that her podcast explores mental health topics, we immediately reached out to invite her to share here. So here is Paula giving her voice to depression.
Let's start with you just telling me a bit about yourself.
Oh my God. That, it's funny because whenever people ask me who's Paula, you would think I would be prepared to say that. But Paula is a girl who was born in Tanzania in 1989, tomboy, loud, opinionated.
From Tanzania, Paula moved to the UK, Malaysia, Dubai, and France before coming to the US for what she expected to be a short pit stop.
Through it all, life happened, and I think finally being in America is when I discovered my depression. And but it's not that I don't believe I didn't have it, because when I was in Malaysia, I had the dark days. By that age, because every holiday I went home or I traveled or anything, I just thought I was homesick. You know, I'm having these dark days because I'm homesick.
But Paula realized it wasn't homesickness, and that was a surprise to more than just herself.
What people didn't get it is I am a very energetic person. I'm a very happy person. Anybody who has met me can tell you, like, oh my God. Even when I came out and said I was battling with depression, some people took it as a shock because, oh, you're always happy, oh, you're always smiling. But depression affected that, because now I would literally be sad. I didn't want to see people. I didn't want to be around people. And I felt so lonely because I wasn't talking about it, right? And I'm from Africa. We don't talk about depression.
Paula describes that depression as when the dark days got extra dark, and that even when nothing was bad, eventually she found herself in the dark place constantly. She says the things she did to cope with or numb awareness of the darkness only made things worse.
I was crying too much. I was drinking and smoking, and I'm trying not to feel, but because I'm trying not to feel, I'm using other things to help me, which was just making it worse. I was losing weight. I just felt so alone, and it was very dark to the extent that I almost wanted to kill myself. I was like, I need this to be over because I don't know how to come out of it.
She didn't know how to come out of it herself, so she reached out to her parents.
I actually called my mom, and me and my mom have a very broken relationship. I go to my dad for everything. So this was the first time I was going to my mom for something. And she told me to pray. She said, just pray. So when my mom told me to pray, I started praying. And the more I prayed, the lighter I felt. Like my heart was very heavy and dark, but slowly by slowly, the more I prayed, it became lighter. It was like the sign was, you need to talk about it. It was like God was telling me, like, thank you for talking to me, and I love that you're talking to me, and please keep talking to me, but you need to still let it out. So I think the prayer was my mom's way of helping me find my light, whatever light that might be.
Paula's light and the need to let it out inspired her to speak very openly and publicly about her depression and suicidal thoughts on the internet.
So I called my dad because, again, our family back home, kind of a big deal. So we always have to be careful with what we put online. That way it doesn't affect my parents back home and they're in the government, because they were in the government and I didn't want to do that. So I called my dad and I was like, Dad, I am depressed. And if I don't talk about it, I'm going to kill myself. He's like, do whatever you need to do. You have my support.
So Paula did what she needed to do, live on Instagram.
Sharing everything openly, just not caring who's watching, who's judging, who's listening, but just sharing. And I started getting messages from some of my friends who I didn't even know, and everybody started opening up about what they're dealing with as well. Because as I said, sometimes you talk to your family or your friends and they tell you, oh, that's just life. Or at least somebody else out there has it worse. I get it, I understand. At least I have a roof under my head. I know somebody right now is sleeping on the cold floor outside. But that doesn't mean what I'm going through doesn't matter. It still matters, you know?
That was the start. First you talked to God.
Yes.
And then you talked to the world. And then the world started talking back to you. There's nothing I believe in almost more strongly than the power of shared stories.
Yes.
I don't think we can read a pamphlet about depression and connect with it in any way that is going to help us on our journey and be like, oh, I understand now that I have those statistics. I understand. No, it's not how it works.
Yeah, it's very different that when you talk to a person who's actually going through that, and that just fueled my heart knowing that, because who knows, maybe I needed them more than they needed me, but to know that I did the same for them was something incredible. So that's how I started dealing and just being open and not caring how many people tell me to shut up and not talk about my depression or my mental health. That's when I went into this era of, I need therapy. I need help. And I went to therapy a few times. Again, therapy is not cheap, so it's not like a lot of us could afford it. And then I was doing fine, like kind of fine.
Kind of fine, as long as she stayed busy and distracted. But then 2020 came along, and the hospitality industry and her job shut down. There was no working from home.
So I started again drinking, because during 2020, it wasn't just COVID. It was Black Lives Matter. It was the Asian thing. I went to school in Malaysia for 5 years. So I have friends who I consider family who are Asian. That place was my home for 5 years. And then back home in my country, our president wasn't noticing anything about COVID. He wasn't taking it serious. My dad was home. He had heart issues and he was sick. So in my head, I'm piling up all these things. Mind you, I'm also an overthinker. I'm just thinking, and the more I'm thinking, I'm just digging worse scenarios and just digging myself deeper. So again, I started drinking more.
Paula says one night, after a lot of both thinking and drinking, she went on Twitter posting about a breakup. A friend read her post and suggested Paula should start a podcast.
And believe it or not, the next day when I woke up, I actually didn't go to the fridge and get a beer. I showered, I dressed, I started researching podcasts. And the good thing about 2020, there were so many free courses online. And as soon as you think about something, it's like the Instagram ads of Facebook start showing the same thing. So it was like, there's how to start a podcast, how to become a podcast, all these free online courses and everything. So I just dived myself in a project.
That project, which became the podcast Talking Shit with P being for Paula, gave her another opportunity to share, vent, create, and connect with another community of like-minded people.
So recording was easy. Hitting publish was like, I'm letting the world know all about me. But what came back was completely different than what I expected. The support, people sharing their struggles, people talking, people like, oh my God, I'm also dealing with this. And for some reason, it started the conversations again, the mental health conversation, the depression, the anxiety, how to deal with it. That's why I say podcasting saved my mental health, because I realized talking about it, having conversations about it on my social media, if I'm having a bad day, you're going to know, I'm going to share it so that somebody out there can maybe send me a meme to make me laugh. For somebody else, it could be drawing. It could be gardening. But our passions can help. I didn't know talking was my passion.
Another practice that helps Paula manage her depression is allowing herself to feel her feels, even the dark ones, but not to allow herself to stay in them. Something that, like most things, is easier to practice in the early stages of an episode.
I give myself a time limit. Like, you're going to be sad for a whole day today. Be sad, cry, binge watch, whatever. But tomorrow we're going to get up and at least go out and see the sunlight, even if it's just walking around the block for 5-10 minutes. So I found ways to cope.
Some of the other tools that help Paula cope include her friends who pour into her.
I am blessed that I have a group of women who are willing to pour into me. So when I'm feeling like in a bad way that I don't want to be alone, because sometimes I'm in a bad way where leave me alone, like switch off my phone, put my phone on airplane mode. I don't want to be disturbed. Don't check on me, nothing. But sometimes I want that company, so I will call them just to have conversation on the phone, even if it means I will cry, and they get it, or let's go out to the park, to dinner.
And as we all know, the journey of finding ways to cope also reveals lots of ways that do not help.
I was also tired of constantly being told two options, therapy, medication.
Because she has learned from her own and other people's experiences that there are many mental health management options, and different ones work for different people, and different ones work for us at different times.
I was like, meditation is not for me, because again, I'm an overthinker. So putting me in silence for 5-10 minutes, I'm just going to go straight to my head, because I'm also a daydreamer. Like, when I just sit here, I'm going to be like, okay. The next thing, like, I've zoned out. So for me, that doesn't work, but it was good to hear, and also to have this conversation that it might not help me, the tools you're using, but somebody who's listening, it might work for them.
As important as it is to add positive, healthy elements to our lives and routines, Paula stresses it is also important to eliminate negative influences.
I went into this phase where I am cutting everybody off who is not a positive in my life. Like, I went through a whole social media phase where I was unfollowing and blocking pages that did not serve me or my mental health. And I would even preach this to my friends and my family. If I'm not good for you, if what I am saying isn't good for you, don't come to complain to me. Just unfollow. It is okay to unfollow people and stop consuming what is not healthy for you.
Paula also practices and preaches the need to fight people-pleasing tendencies and to learn to do what's healthiest for ourselves, which often means saying no.
Because once you let go of that, your baggage, your depression, I realized most of the time my depression was I was always saying yes to things. I was always trying to please people. I was always trying to be that person for everybody, but they weren't going to be that to me. So you have to really work on yourself to realize those things and be okay with letting them go. So this new you can open up and get the love that you deserve, the people that you deserve, and handle your depression.
Paula acknowledges that not all of us have the people we deserve, but she says they are out there.
If you live in a world where you're constantly having to please people, that's not your world. So community has been a big impact on me. And when it comes to community, don't just join any community. Join the community that resonates with you, because there's nothing like showing up your authentic self and being accepted for it. So that's why I say, work on yourself, learn who you are, and then show up as that. You don't have to please anybody. You think you're going to lose people, so what? You're also going to gain more people. You think you're going to not be liked? Trust me, if you know me, I'm loud, I curse, but I show up as me, and I have an entire army of communities that show up for me. So show up authentically you, and be unapologetic for what you are, because your depression, your anxiety, that's just part of you. It's not who you are. And once you realize that, life will be so much easier.
So, Terry, Paula didn't just bust that stigma around not speaking about your mental illness. I feel like she exploded it.
It's a good way to put it.
It was just amazing that she went, like you had said, from recognizing that she had to get it out, or there was going to be something really bad that happened, but she went public with it and was able to get, I think, some of the healing that she needed and the permission to talk about this, and recognize that there were so many other people who deal with mental health.
And speaking of permission, when she described her family back home, she said they were kind of a big deal in the government and that they'd had to be very careful about what they posted on social media. But when she told her father she believed it was a matter of life or death that she talked about this, he just said, "You have my full support. Do what you got to do."
Mm-hmm. That's an incredible job, that he did as a parent, to not say, "You'll have to deal with this," and keep it kind of hush-hush. Right. I love that he gave her that permission and she ran with it.
Absolutely.
I also love something that Paula said. We interject it here and there, but one of the things that she said was that don't worry if not everything that's suggested to you or that people say would help with depression actually works. Like she brought up one of the ones that a lot of people say is that meditation. And she just said, "I tried it. It was not right for me." I think that's important is for people to not get stuck on just the first few things that somebody recommends that you do or that you try. Because she just said, look, you got to find a community that resonates with you. You got to let those feelings be there authentically, but don't feed them. Don't do things that make them worse. And don't get stuck just because the first thing that you try or the first few, maybe even several things that you try just don't work.
Right. Like meds. They often don't work at first, but there are so many. It's one of the reasons why we always ask people who we interview what they do to manage their mental health, because I would never have thought that games or a puzzle would be a mental health management tool. But if they distract you from your own thoughts, they certainly can be, as well as all the other things like a photo shoot that Paula brought up, which I thought was just great. Mm-hmm. She did mention communities online, and again, we encourage you to search for good and safe and credible communities online. You can look for depression, bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, whatever your mix is of interest or of experience. And we want to include 3 that she mentioned: Life with Paula, which is at LWP_2017, BetterHelp, which is therapists. And on LinkedIn, she said that mental health change agents has been a good space for her. And then, of course, we invite you to the Giving Voice to Depression community page on Facebook. There are thousands of people already there waiting to communicate with you and encourage you and let you know you're not alone.
We truly hope that our podcast brings a little more understanding, helps you better articulate and reflect on your own experience with depression, or better understand how to support someone else who is struggling.
If this episode has been of comfort or value to you, know that there are hundreds of others like it in our archive, which you can easily find at our website, givingvoicetodepression.com. And remember, if you're struggling, speak up, even if it's hard. If someone else is struggling, take the time to listen.